All right. Hi, everyone. Um, Today we're going to be talking about, this is Laurel Path Lessons, and we're going to be talking about managing peer fear. I am Baroness Tyra Fillpusdother. I'm a court baron, a baroness. I live in the Shire of Thistletor and participate in Vockerfell as well, and those are both in the Principality of Sinagua. I've been in the SCA for almost 20 years. I am protege to Elsie Hunerfuck, and I am sojourn artisan to Ashlyn Mirror of Ravenslock. And that's what she calls somebody during their year trial period to see if the relationship will work out to be Laurel and apprentice. And I started in the SCA in a small shire that had a lot of peers, and have continued to have a friend group that is predominantly peers, and there's more every day. So I am coming from the perspective of someone that hasn't struggled a lot with peer fear, primarily because I came into the SCA surrounded by peers. And I would like to let my co-host and guest, Luiggi, introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Baron Luiggi Giovanni de Rossi. I am both a court baron and a landed baron currently, not much longer, thankfully. I am from the barony of Alicia up in Humboldt County. Was a large barony when I started 27 years ago, but it's never had a lot of peers. Currently, we have more peers than we ever have before, and we have like 1/10 of the actual people. So I do interact with more peers now than I used to. But I'm afraid of everyone. So peer fear is definitely something that I have plenty of experience with, both in my own experience and my friends who don't have as much chance to encounter peers as some of those who are luckier who live in shires filled with peers. But that's all I have for that.
Great, thank you. So our goals for today, we're going to share some specific examples and short stories from people experiencing peer fear and some of the strategies or ways that they've come to overcome those fears. We're going to identify why we may experience fear in talking to or interacting with peers. This talk is going to focus specifically with experiences with Laurels, but it's potentially applicable to other peerages and other groups as well. We're going to discuss some steps and strategies to manage and or overcome peer fear. And we're going to, at the end, we're going to recognize that we're all a work in progress and there's always more improvement that can be made. So we're going to start with trying to understand why. There's a lot of reasons why someone might experience fear in talking to or interacting with or being around Laurels or a group of Laurels. And we want to also recognize that there are as many reasons why as people in the SCA. We're all unique, and each interaction we have with another person is likely to be unique. So what you struggle with in one interaction might not be the same as the way that you struggle in other interactions. So it's important to understand maybe like all of the factors that apply to why you might be struggling. So some of the whys, people could be shy, introverted personality, have social anxiety, like Luiggi said, he struggles to interact with anybody. So that can obviously create a situation where it's hard to interact with peers or non-peers. A perception, you've heard stories of the mean Laurel, or maybe you've seen a Laurel interacting with someone else and it just seemed like mean, or you didn't like the way they interacted with somebody else. Maybe you've had a personal bad experience with somebody that's led you to hesitate to have further interactions with somebody from that same group of the group of Laurels, or whatever the case may be. Maybe some people are just intimidating, or maybe you idolize somebody and so you're afraid to interact with that person because you hold them up on a pedestal or something else. There could be other reasons too. Luiggi, why don't you tell us about what you were thinking of about getting feedback or criticism on something that you're really new at and how that might affect your interaction.
So one of the things I've noticed that dealing with new artists, new craftspeople over the years, there's a point where you become really excited about something. really excited about something and you've invested a lot of energy into it, but you haven't really reached a point where you're really confident and experienced in it. And at that point, you are wanting to share it with people and to get feedback and get, take classes and learn more. And that's the point where if you're given, if you are you have a bad experience or given negative feedback that you're not prepared for, it's the easiest point to be discouraged and to give up. If you can get past that point where your experience level exceeds the point you're at and you get more confidence, you get to the point where you don't care as much about what people say. And if if you treat people in that period with a lot of support and a lot of concern, it's going to be much easier for them to be, and that's either as a Laurel or someone teaching, or as the person who is experiencing it, just to know that you care a lot about what you're doing. And when you care a lot about something, it is easier to be hurt when you're given a bad feedback or have a bad experience.
Absolutely, thank you. So now I'm going to share some examples that I got from some other people that I know that have experienced peer fear. And these examples, I thought it would flow better to just go ahead and include the section that they talk about how they've overcome that fear of interacting with those people. So coming into the SCA, I had a fear of laurels. I was told there were people who would look at my stitching and be upset it was machine done. And my first event didn't help, with 6 people having suggestions on how to improve my garb completely unasked for. Much later, a household took me in and started making me feel welcome. The heads of that household were both Laurels, and they sat me down and listened to me, giving me the space to open up and be honest and assuring me about the fears I had. Over time, I learned not to look at the Laurels, but the people, and with the complications that being human brings. Probably one of the most important points was when I watched a garb Laurel's pure joy at making an outfit that looked like a picture, realizing she really doesn't care what the people around her are wearing, and she wasn't doing what she was doing just to prove that she was better than others. She did it because it was what made her happy. So in this example, we can see this is one of those ones where they were warned coming into the SCA that that there might be people that might be judging what she's doing, and she thought that if she didn't do things perfectly like a Laurel might do, that she was going to get criticized. And then she also experienced people telling her, giving her advice that was not asked for. So it felt like criticism, like she was being told she didn't do a good enough job. And it took being around other Laurels and being heard and felt like, that her fears, just talking through it with other people, and then seeing the joy that a Laurel got in creating what they create and realizing it wasn't about what other people were doing, it was about that Laurel doing what they love. So in our second example, I was attached to a really mean Laurel who was super nasty to people and offered advice to people when it wasn't wanted. I just assumed everyone was like that. She basically told me not to talk to peers except her because they were all mean and nasty. So I was super scared of them. It wasn't until I befriended a couple different people that I learned that no, that wasn't the case, and that she was a pretty terrible Laurel in that sense. I've learned that it's helpful for me to say to peers, I'd like your feedback about X so that I can grow in my art and craft. That is really helpful for me. I also learned that if I don't ask, I won't get the support. Now that I'm coming back, I've been more vocal about asking for help, and it's made a world of difference. But people are a lot nicer than I was led to believe. Looks and others' opinions are deceiving. So that feeds into the why that I was talking about. Like, you hear these stories about mean Laurels, and then you're afraid because they've all been grouped together, and they're can be perceived as this like nasty group of people that just want to criticize everybody else. But as this person discovered, like, it was that one specific person, and got bad guidance, obviously, but then they discovered through interacting with others that that wasn't necessarily the case. It was just an example of one person who was kind of embodying that mean Laurel idea. Luiggi, did you have any other examples from your personal life and struggling to interact with people with the anxiety you have?
Sure. When I first started, I encountered, I came into the SCA. I'd already been doing martial arts. For a long time, I entered the armored combat, and I met these two gentlemen who had come up to create and entertain Alicia with making our new pod of arms, which was something they felt was really important, bringing combat, making it joyous. And I enjoyed meeting these guys, and I fought them, and I won against them. And I asked them, one of the people was, and that's how I met Knights. I didn't meet them as a peer that I was supposed to go up to. This guy came up to help us, and I at that point I was fine talking to Knights, but I heard the stories about Laurels, and as an artist, I was really interested in that, and I didn't meet any. I never met any Laurels. I'd hear stories about Laurels, but I never really meet any, and I was always afraid when I did meet them. I didn't know what they were about, and eventually I got to the point where I had heard all these stories, and I knew that, people could be mean, and I was judging competitions and running competitions and reading these, the the feedback these people were given. And there was one point where I talked to the person that had entered the contest, and I said, I don't want you to read the feedback on the back of this paper. If you, I will give it to you and you can make the decision. But it made me cry reading feedback given to someone else. And I've seen and heard so many stories, and I've encountered so many people who have had these experiences. But what I realized is that in the end, if you can develop your art in a way that gets you to a point where you want to be, you can also develop your attitude and your professionalism. And as a professional artist, I knew what criticism was coming into the SCA. So I was never afraid of that, of being criticized. I was always afraid of looking silly or being looked at poorly because of, my garb or my art. And it actually I was more afraid to enter SCA competitions than I was to enter juried peer art competitions. I'd entered state level art competitions more easily than I'd enter a local art competition in the SCA because of that level of stress that peers brought to me. But over the last 27 years, I've encountered so many people that were so supportive, and so many people who, peer or not peer, who were willing to listen and willing to help, and so much positive attitude towards making things better, that now I can go to the king and queen or knights, pelicans. I can say, hey, I need help, or I need someone to do this. I've reached a level of comfort just by realizing that these are just the people. When you stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning talking to somebody about a problem they have, you know that that's not the queen, that's just a person. When you talk to someone, when you're packing up their, camp, and you're helping them pack their car up, that's the person. And if you can get to the point where you realize that everyone who you're talking to was in the same exact spot you were in before they were up here, then it's much easier to encounter them as a human being, as a fellow traveler, as someone who is trying to do as much as they can. Everyone is on a journey. Even once you've reached the accolade, once you've become a laurel, once you become a pelican, you're still working and you're still moving forward. So
Excellent. Thank you so much. So that ties into our steps to overcoming. So our first one is laurels are people too. It seems stupid, but sometimes it is easy to forget that these people that have this award or are, royal peers or anything else, like when it all comes down to it, they're just people enjoying a hobby just like the rest of us. Then my next point is, and I say this in quotes, we're all weird here. We all have a level of, shyness or maybe introvertedness or socially awkwardness, the SDA tends to appeal to people who tend to be more awkward or, kind of outcast from, the norm of society and things like that. So remembering that, when you're interacting with somebody, if they're seeming kind of off or awkward, like they probably just feel just as out of place and uncomfortable as you do. So we're all weird here. Learning to take criticism, advice, or opinions from others in the best light possible. We're not all trained at, the right way to give feedback, or there's this saying that unsolicited advice or unasked for advice is always criticism. And it is, but it's hard. Like, we kind of all fall into it sometimes, and it takes practice to learn not to give advice unless it's asked for, because it can feel like criticism. And some people are just not good at their delivery either. So trying to remember that, and I try to do this in my daily life too, is maybe somebody's having a bad day and things come out wrong, or, not the way they intend. So try to start out by looking at things in the best light possible, and, don't just like that knee-jerk reaction from whatever you heard from that person. My next bullet is people aren't elevated because they're necessarily good teachers or communicators. Every Laurel I've interacted with is super passionate about their art. Maybe it's what they were recognized for, or maybe it's something new that they're doing. Find a common topic that you both can talk about, or just listen to them talk, and you'll probably find interacting way more comfortable. Maybe it's going to be too much info and you're going to want them to back off, but if you can kind of break that ice and get them talking about something they're passionate about, it's going to be easier to interact with them. Especially because, some of us, like, we all have different communication styles, and maybe it's just not meshing for the two of you. But if you can find a common topic or find something that they're passionate about for them to talk about, it may help alleviate that uncomfortableness. My next tip is find someone you trust. Ask them to help you bridge the gap, or introduce you to somebody, or help you start a conversation with a peer. I call them like your emotional support friend, somebody that you either already knows that person, or is more comfortable interacting with people that they don't know super well, and maybe they can help you get into that, get that conversation going in something that feels a little more comfortable to you. The next thing is just to remember we're all here because we love this game. So, I don't think anybody is out to try to ruin the game for anybody else. We're here because we love what we're doing. The Laurels love doing art. So if we look at it that way, maybe we can forgive a little bit of maybe harsh interactions with other people. Another suggestion I have is to take other classes. And an example is the taking and receiving feedback that Cecilia teaches. It's really great to kind of hear the way that she breaks down all the different steps and like how to navigate that. And it can all help us learn how to give feedback in a way that can come across a little bit in a little bit nicer way, a little bit, removing that the harshness that can come from giving feedback sometimes. And then just remember, some people really are mean. Have a good cry about it. Talk to a friend or somebody who you're close to, and just move on. And then just maybe decide you're not going to interact with that person. We don't always get along with everybody. And sometimes it's okay to recognize that there's people that maybe you just don't want to interact with. And that's okay. And even I can still be kind of awkward or weird meeting new people or trying to like get into a conversation with somebody. So specifically with Laurel, I found it incredibly easy to start conversations with strangers when I was doing, well, we were calling it the Laurel hunt. I know some people didn't love the connotation with that, but the seeking Laurels to ask them questions about their art, or like you basically asked 3 questions and like you tried to, talk to as many or up to 50 in a year. And every time I talked to a new person, it got easier and easier. So that brings me to the last one, practicing. Nobody's ever good at something right out the gate. So even and learning to communicate and learning to talk to new people or enter scary situations, the way that we get better at that is by practicing. So in conclusion, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Or in this case, what I would say is don't let perfect be the enemy of improvement. If you have a bad interaction with somebody, it's okay. We all have that. Like, move on. Try not to, run it over in your head too many times and get caught up in it. We all have bad days. We all have bad interactions. And I try personally to, give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, maybe they were just having a bad time. Like, maybe their dog is sick and they're in a bad mood, or they didn't get very good sleep last night. So, I mean, it takes several interactions with somebody for me to finally decide, like, interacting with them is not worth it. So, or I'll have a bad day and I'll be like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? So just remember, we're all in this together, and every day we're just trying to do better than we did the day before. And we're all a work in progress. So do you have anything else to add, Luiggi?
Yeah, I was going to say, so one of the things that I really love about the SCA is the time you have to talk to people when they're not engaging in. So what I do is, like, everybody's running all day Saturday. Everybody's got stuff to do. Everybody's got places to be. But when they're tearing down or they're setting up, that's when they're just themselves. And if you can, you find somebody to help and get to know them, you'll find that a lot of these peers that you're afraid of are really laid back and relaxed and much more friendly and easygoing when they're not in character, so to speak, or on. The other thing is later at night when people are partying, it may be, some people drink, some people don't drink, but everybody's generally hanging out and having fun. And at that point, you'll be sitting there and you won't even realize it, but there'll be 5 people all sitting there talking, telling stories, and you're sitting there listening and interjecting and having a conversation with these people, and you won't even notice that all of them have crowns on, or all of them are knights, and you're talking about fighting and they're listening to you, or all of them are laurels and they're all talking about art. You won't even see that you're surrounded by people that you would be intimidated by at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So just take the chance to meet people when they're not as stressed out and they're not, not as much likely to be having a bad day, or not as busy, not as preoccupied with what's going on. And it's a really good feeling. I honestly don't know if there's many better feelings I've had in the SCA, when you're sitting there talking about fighting or about art, and the people around you are listening to you, but they are peers, and it makes you feel part of that whole thing. And it's a really good feeling, and it is definitely worth trying to overcome that fear, which I still have, even though I say I've overcome it. Every day I go to an SCA event, I'm afraid of somebody. So don't be worried if you're still afraid. Even if you listen to this and have taken these steps, you're going to be better than you were, though, in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or want to add anything?
Can I add my peer fear story?
Absolutely. We'd love to hear it from a peer herself.
So back when I first started, I started in Atlantia, long before I had even an AOA. I remember not being really sure how to interact with peers because I didn't totally understand the hierarchy of the SCA at the time. I didn't want to accidentally offend somebody, and I'd come out of academia where hierarchy was really important. And then I realized I was interacting with peers and they were all okay. And part of the reason the hierarchy felt weird is they just didn't care about it, which was a little different than my experiences in the everyday world. So that was something that once I put those pieces together, it was a lot easier to get past those pieces. And it is every bit as weird and awkward even today sometimes. So despite peerages.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good perspective. I guess I've been doing this for so long, I kind of forget, like, that whole, there's the unknown, like, especially if you're newer in the SCA, maybe it still feels, and yeah, definitely. So that's great. Revna, did you have something?
So yeah, the idea of helping someone, or like offering to help them set up or whatnot, that's a fantastic idea. But often I see a lot of people are like, nope, I've got this. What's another version of this that would be a little more accepted?
Offer to carry a chair. When you see somebody walking across the Eric and maybe that looks like they need to carry something, or if you're doing your rounds and you see somebody working on something, I've never met anybody that doesn't want to talk about what thing they're working on. So sometimes it's just seeing that moment, that it looks like somebody's like just chilling or doing their thing. And there's not always going to be a good time. And maybe you'll go a few events before, seeing that moment to go talk to that person. But that's part of why I add the suggestion of like, have your emotional support friend. Like if you know somebody who's friends with them, it can be a little bit easier to get an introduction or, find a moment. So hopefully that's helpful.
Also, if you have, let's say, for example, you have a new person that you're leading around. I do this with heavy fighting a lot. Introduce them to people are safe. So, for example, I have a new fighter that they've fought a few times at practice. I'm not going to introduce them to people that are going to just hit them and walk away. I'm going to introduce them to people who are going to help them, support them, teach them, and are fun. Same thing with art. If someone is, you have a friend who's interested in the SCA, they come to an event and they talk to you about tablet weaving, take them over to a Laurel that does tablet weaving, take them over to, people who do textiles, take them. If you take the steps to treat the people that you are helping the same way you treat the people that you're introducing them, that will really go a long way to help them understand that these are also just people. So I've been really trying to introduce people, even if they're not new to the SCA, but they're new to the area, to actually just go out of my way to introduce them and say, this is this person, this is what they do, this is my friend, this is what he wants to do or she wants to do. Yeah. And bridge that gap between new person and SCA citizen, make people know people. That's my next goal, so to speak.
So what about someone like, they're new, but they don't have any friends and everything. Like they're literally just walking into the lion's den of, I want to do this thing. This sounds like fun. I don't know anyone, but I've placed my tent here and hopefully they don't kill me.
She'll just, and they don't know anyone at all?
Correct. That was me this year.
If you don't know anyone at all,
I kid you not.
Go set up Royal.
Yeah. I kid you not. My very first event camping this year, I walked into a missed event and I knew absolutely nobody.
That's terrifying to me. I can't even imagine that situation.
Yeah.
I lived in Cayenne for 8 years and did not go to a single event because of that exact situation. So don't ask me how to fix that.
Yeah. I mean, we try to tell everybody and remind everybody we're all shadow lanes. We are all supposed to be the welcoming committee. It can be hard. It really can. So chalking, I mean, if you were going to give advice to somebody who was new, if they are looking to, have somebody to maybe show them around or ask questions, they should, when you're paying at gate, like you can ask somebody, like, I know it's probably challenging, but I'm new, can I get introduced to somebody, or can somebody explain this thing to me? Usually if somebody doesn't volunteer to shadow lane, if you get asked, like, can you explain this thing to me? Most people are going to take the time to explain it and like maybe realize you need a little bit more help to get oriented. And I hope you had an okay experience meeting some people. You're still around, so something must have gone right.
Yeah. At the end of the weekend, I had met a couple people and I kicked Luigi's butt in an arts and science tournament. So, golden friendship started right there.
Yeah.
All right. So, is there anything else that we wrap up the recording?
That was all my topics I had. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me, Luiggi.
Thank you. You're welcome.